Thank you, and good evening to everyone who is here. I am very pleased to be able to talk with you guys tonight. So this is going to be hopefully a fun evening. I'm going to share my screen here so that you guys can see my talk, and hopefully we are ready to go. So I do like drought tolerant landscapes, and it's simply because of the fact that drought is a fact of life here in Kansas. We definitely have to look at that, and it's better to be safe than sorry. We get wet years, we get dry years. Here in Wichita, we can get on average around 30 inches of rain, but that is, that comes and goes. I mean, we've had as little as like 11 inches of rain annually, or over 50 inches of rain. So just the joy of being in the center of a continental landmass. We can just have such a wide variety of weather. And so, you got to find plants that are willing to hang with us as well. One of the things that I think a lot of people are afraid of landscaping is because they think it's going to be difficult. And drought tolerant landscapes are not difficult to create. They just use really common horticulture practices that are easy. And that's what makes them just really fantastic. And also, I personally think that a drought tolerant landscape, because it is drought tolerant, it's more easy to care for because it is used to our kind of weather, used to our landscape. This is where it wants to grow. And something that wants to be here is going to be happy. So really the basic horticulture practices that make for a good drought tolerant landscape is, one, you got to plant it. That makes it the most efficient. Got to make sure the soil is good. You have to select the appropriate plants to grow. You have to limit the amount of lawn. I'll talk about that later. You need to use mulch. It's the gardener's best friend, believe me. You need to water appropriately. Some plants need a little more water, some need a little less. You got to figure that out. And then timely maintenance, keeping your plants happy so that they are wanting to grow here. That's what makes them easy to grow. So a drought tolerant landscape isn't just any kind of landscape. It's a landscape that can fit into any type of landscape. It can come in any size and any style. And believe it or not, water features are a drought tolerant feature for a landscape. Actually, they can use less water because all that's happening there is the water is evaporating, unlike plants, which are transpiring and evaporating. So the thing about a garden is you can make it your own personal garden, and you can use any style you want. Persian gardens, they're beautiful. A Greek or Roman peristyle garden, very rectilinear, but it can be very nice. Italian Renaissance gardens, those things are a lot of fun with lots of, splashing water and interesting places to see. They're fun. A French Baroque parterre, very stylized, but gorgeous in its own way. You can make your own French parterre in your backyard if you wish. It's easy. It's more about how you maintain it, how you plant it, how you design it. It can be an oriental garden, soothing and great for peaceful enjoyment of our natural world. You can see an English romantic landscape with their funny little, I forget the stylings of the things like ha-has and I'm trying to think anyway, other things like little pergolas. These are fun things that go into an English romantic landscape. You can also have a landscape cottage garden. These are pretty and intimate and fun to be with. So a lot of people think that a low water landscape has to be cactus. It is if you want it, but only if you want it. It doesn't have to be cactus. The key to a drought tolerant landscape is planning it. Planning allows for the efficiencies that need to go into a garden landscape. And also it allows you to take advantage of what we call the landscape micro niches. So a micro niche is a small area in your landscape that provides a habitat for maybe something that wouldn't grow in another habitat. I always like to think of, the north side of the house will be cool and shady. You can grow things that prefer a cooler climate on the north side of the house. Whereas on the south side of the house, where the sun is, full-time year-round, unless it's cloudy, that's where you can get a nice hot climate. And yes, if you want to grow your desert plants on the south side of the house, they would love it. So because of the sun aspects, shade, soil, wind, water, how rain sheets off the roof of your house, that will make a micro niche. So when you're planning, you really need to take inventory of what the micro niches are. So the east side of the house will have the morning sun with afternoon shade. The west side of the house will have morning shade but afternoon sun. The north side of the house, parts of it will get no sun because of the way the building is. You need to think about how wind goes around your home between you and the neighbor, because you might get a wind tunnel effect if there's a small space between the two, or if one building is taller than the other. It can create a wind tunnel. Here in Kansas, the prevailing winds in the winter are from the north. In the summer, they're from the south. So you need to take that into account. Also, a lot of our major storms come in from the south and west. That's something to consider. So you also need to look at the lay of the land. Sometimes the land, you'll have a drainage swale around one part of your house, or you might have an area with a berm where the land's a little higher. You might have an area which is low and water seems to collect there all the time. That's something to keep in mind when you're looking for micro niches. Take advantage of those. Those aren't yard problems. They are a micro niche, and if you take advantage of them, you can have some very unusual plants growing in your yard, even though it's a drought tolerant landscape. So that's one of the cool things about, micro niches. You also need to inventory your existing features as you're planning your landscape. You want some areas to be private. You want some areas to be public. Definitely the street side of a home is always public. You've got surface areas. You might have a garage or a shed. So you need to inventory those basic features. But you also need to inventory things like utility lines, the water line, the gas line, the telephone line, the electrical power line. If you have buried utilities, I always encourage people to call 811. They'll send someone out and locate those utilities for you so you don't dig into them when you're changing your landscape around. You also need to look at your existing trees and shrubs. You might want to keep some of them. An older existing tree especially if it's a nice hardwood that does well here in Kansas. So say a maple tree or an oak, you will want to keep those. Those provide shade and will again um, help you help your landscape be a lovely place to live in. So I would note which one those are. If you got something that you're going to take out, you might note that on your plan as you're working. Well, this one is, I don't like this, or this is an older tree and it's, barely alive. We're going to take it out. That's something to note. But you note things like property lines, patios, slopes and swales. That's where that swales or where that water may puddle all the time. You ought to want to think of looking out your home windows. What are you looking into in your yard? You can design the view you want to see out of your window. And that's one of the fun things to do when you're doing a landscape design, is looking out the window and thinking, wouldn't it be nice if I could look at this? So look at your windows. Think about the views. Look at the garage or sheds. There will be micro niches around those, places to plant something different, but also maybe something you want to screen so people don't see it. So the service areas, you might, where the air conditioner is, or the trash is kept, or where you want your potting bench to be. Those are areas that you might want to fence off or at least screen. So these are all things to keep in mind as you're planning your drought tolerant landscape. Once you have that inventory done, then you can start thinking about what you want. So I like to tell people to plan with the idea of having an outdoor room. So each little area will be a room. Do you want to have a room for your kids or your pets to play in? Where do you want space to entertain people? Do you want a landscape focal point? And that's a plant or an area which will probably be fairly high water in use and fairly high in maintenance, but it would be an area where you could put some really interesting plants, things that would attract people's attention. And that's something to think about. Then you want to think about your maintenance. You want to keep some areas low maintenance, low water use. That allows you to kind of let those areas live on their own. You don't have to spend as much time with those areas once they are planted and mature. Then you have your moderate water use areas, kind of, the average area. But then, like I said, the focal point, the high maintenance, the high water use area. You don't want to make it very big because you're thinking drought tolerant, but nonetheless, you can have that area and you can place it where it will be most advantageous for views both outside the house and inside the house. Once you've decided what your rooms are going to be outside, this is where you can go into the details of what's going to go where. Using a piece of graph paper where one square on the graph paper is a foot is an easy way to be able to draw out your landscape and figure out just how big you want things to be. I always tell people to design in broad strokes so that you have a feeling of flow through your landscape. And you also, when you do that, you want to think about not just flow vertically, but flow horizontally. So you're thinking in the terms of large, medium, and small plants. Overstory, mid-story, understory. Turf and ground cover can be like carpets. You also want to think in terms of texture, of fine, medium, and coarse, as well as color. Color throughout the season. So, and again, as you're thinking about where plants should go, remember your maintenance levels of high, medium, and low. High maintenance level, high water use. medium level maintenance, medium level water use. And when you're doing this, you're going to look at the plants and you're going to, for right now, you're not thinking of the actual plant, but it doesn't hurt to think of, oh, I want this plant here. But what you're going to think in terms of is what plant would go here in a low maintenance area. So you're going to want to, and one of the reasons you're designing in areas is because you're taking advantage of the micro niche, and then you're also taking advantage if you want plants that like the same micro niche and the same level of maintenance to go together. So you think in terms of existing hardwood trees. That's a tall tree. That's an overstory tree. Or it might be a medium-sized tree. An existing conifer. Those are trees, you know, pine trees. They don't lose their leaves. They provide green color in the landscape throughout the year. Those are nice. Shrubs. They can be flowering shrubs, or they don't have to be flowering shrubs. Maybe they have a nice fall color. Again, does it have a need for a high maintenance area or a low maintenance area? But plan the area so that it works for you, so that you have the rooms that you want. A room for relaxation, a room for play, a room just to look at. So, and of course, ground covers can act kind of low level, like low level benches or something. They can, and shrubs and stuff can screen off an area that you don't want to be seen, as well as provide color throughout the year. So these are all things to think about as you are planning your landscape. Another very important thing about landscaping is the basics of your soil. Soil is really the basic of drought management. If you have good soil and your plants can grow deep, strong roots, they will be more drought tolerant. Unfortunately, one of the problems with soils in our urban areas is they're not good. So you're going to have to take some time and work on them. Urban soils, they've been churned up when the buildings are built. The topsoil is scraped off, and then trucks and graders and everything roll back and forth over the soil and compress it. And then they throw back on the topsoil, and it's just doesn't work. Since it's a big job to change the soil in your home landscape, I encourage you to do it in small bites. Choose an area. You've got your overall plan now. Choose to work on one area at a time. Go in, dig that soil up, and it's not going to help a healthy structure. Most soils in Kansas are what we call mollisols. They have been created by prairies, and they have a block structure, not in our urban areas. They are not, we've kind of created a plate structure, in fact, by compacting a section of the soil that's under the topsoil. That's not good. So you kind of want to restore a little bit of soil structure, which means you're going to have to dig down about, you know, at least 12 inches, because most plant roots are in the top 12 inches. Soil has a texture: sand, silt, and clay. You can do a jar test. I'll show you how to do that in the next slide. But I also encourage you to have your soil tested. You can get this done through Sedgwick County. And if you go to the web address that I've given here on this page, you can see what you need to do to get a soil test. They run around $20, if I'm remembering this correct. I think I am. So, and it's really easy to do. And they give you directions on how to do a soil test, which is really nice. And once you know your soil type, or how much sand, silt, and clay you have, you can use this little tool I show on here that's brightly colored. This is a soil triangle, and you can figure out what kind of soil that you have using the soil triangle. A loam is the best type of soil. You want to work towards a loam, and but there's silty clay loams, there's clay loams, there's sandy clay loams, there's silt loams, sandy loams, and then there's pure sand, pure clay, and some people, that's what they have in their yard. If you live in the river bottom here in Wichita, you may have a lot of sand. If you live up on the heights on either the west side or the east side, you're gonna have clay. I live in the Rose Hill clay area, so I know about dealing with clay. It's great for water because it holds the water, unlike sand, which just lets the water run through. But it's tight and it can get compacted very easily. And when it dries out, it's hard to get it to rehydrate. It can be a mess. But a soil test will tell you about your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium levels, important nutrients that plants need to grow. And they can also give you, if you request it, the amount of organics that are in your soil. Because while soil is mineral, it is also organic matter. So soil is organic matter, mineral matter, as well as space for air and space for water. So a good soil has all of those components: air, water, mineral, and organic. So let's go look at a jar test. This is something you can do. It's really easy. You collect about 2 cups of soil, and you want to get down into the soil. So you go down, you try and get some from the top and from the sides, and down to about 8 inches, 6 to 8 inches. You want about 2 cups worth in a large jar. You mix that soil well, and you break up any clods or anything like that. The clods will mess up your test if you have any clods. So you want to break it up. So it's something that you're going to need to have to work at, especially if you have a heavy clay soil and it wants to be a clod. So then you add the water and you shake it well, and it's going to, make kind of a slurry. And you want enough water to make a slurry. You don't want a milkshake, you want a slurry. So it's going to be kind of wet and thin. You then set it off to the side. What you're going to do is you're going to kind of allow it to settle out so that you end up with what looks like here in the photograph. So the top of the water, you can see some of the organic matter is still floating. And there's a little bit of clay still floating, along with that kind of brown color is kind of some of the other organic, tiny, tiny, minute particles of organic matter floating in the water. You want most of the clay and the silt and the sand to settle out. Sand's the heaviest. It's the largest particle. It's going to settle out first. Silt is going to settle out next. It is much finer mineral particles, and it's slower to settle. Clay will be the last to settle because clay particles are actually microscopic, and they can float for a long time, which is why I say let it sit. Don't mess with it. Don't shake it for 24 hours. And if the water still isn't clearing, you might even have to let it set for a little longer before it clears, and then you can measure the soil that's in the jar. You measure the total, and here we have about 2 3/8 inches of soil matter, and then you measure each component separately. So you measure the sand. Well, we've got about 1.5 inches of sand here. You measure the silt. We've got about 1/2 inch of silt. Then we have about 3/8 inches of clay. So then you're going to divide each of the components by the total number to get a percentage. And in my jar test, as I just said, we had 2 3/8 inches of overall soil. And when you divide the sand, the 1.5 inches of sand, by the 2 3/8 inches, you get a 63%. The silt, a 1/2 inch, comes out at 21%, and the clay comes out 3/8 inch, comes out at 16%. You can find this soil texture triangle on the internet. It's real easy to do. And what you do is each edge of the triangle represents one of these components. So sand is at the bottom, clay is on one side, silt is on the other. What you do is you go along and you find the percentage that you found. So if we go along the bottom, we see 60 and 70. Well, about 63 right in there. Okay, you run the arrow up. Over here are 16% of clay. Okay, we run that over. And then up here on the silt side, around 21%, we have a big long arrow coming down. And where they meet, that tells you the type of soil that you have. And in this case, it's a sandy loam. So that's not bad, but it could use with a lot more organic matter. So amending your soil. This is the big one. Organic amendments are best. Anything that's composted. You can buy it or you can make it yourself. Some people, they'll go around to their neighbors and say, are you collecting your lawn clippings? Can I have them? I'm going to compost them. You can compost your kitchen vegetables, parings and stuff. And that's a whole different talk, is on how to compost. But if you want to learn how to compost, K-State's got some great articles that you can read on how to compost. But composted is best. It's already starting to break down. So there's nutrients that are available in the compost for the plants, as well as the composted organic matter acts to break up the soil. And it also acts to like a little sponge, so that when you water the soil, it catches on and holds the water so that your plants can then use it. You also want to look at, if you did get a soil test from K-State, at this point you could start adding your nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium or even sulfur if you have a high alkaline soil. Our soils in this area tend to be alkaline because the rock base for this area is limestone. Limestone, we were once, a sea running, part of a sea that ran right through the middle of North America. And so that all the things that lived and died and fell to the bottom of the sea became limestone. And then limestone, as the land rose after the last glaciation, the limestone was there and that became part of the soil. Limestone is alkaline. Most times all we have to add to our soil is nitrogen. Phosphorus and potassium, we usually have enough, but because, like I said, urban soils are rotten, they're not really good. You need to get a soil test to know if you have the right balance of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, or if your soil needs sulfur to acidifies it. So amending the soil. And when you amend the soil, you're going to put a lot of organic matter on it, and you're going to dig it down to about 12 inches if you can. Sometimes if you got a good rototiller, that will help. Sometimes you just need to dig it in with a shovel. Good exercise for all of us, weekend warriors. It's kind of fun to get out there and get some physical labor in and feel good. after you've worked your muscles. But amending the soil is definitely part of having a drought tolerant landscape. Plants. I'm not going to go into types of plants here or actual names of plants and stuff. I'm going to talk broadly about plants. The key to a drought tolerant landscape is that you're using native and naturalized plants. Native plants are those that evolved here. This is where they want to be. They like this area of the country because they grew up here. This is good. Naturalized plants are those plants that are from other parts of the world, but they grew up in a similar ecosystem in another part of the world. So when they are transplanted here, they're going to say, oh, well, this feels like home. And they're also going to do very well. When you're looking at plants, you want to plan for color for all seasons. Plants, right now we've got our spring blooms going on and it's really pretty, but there's a lot of things that do well in the summer, as well as we've got fall bloomers. These are things that you want to think about so that you have those, and you want to utilize texture. So this, you can have a purple leaf plum, which has purple leaves and a small leaf. Those are lovely little trees. They don't get they're more like a large shrub. They're very nice. You can use grasses. We've got wonderful native grasses, and many of them are now being hybridized so that they do even better in our home landscapes. For example, switchgrass. Switchgrass out in the prairie likes to lay over, but they have hybridized a type of switchgrass that stands pretty upright throughout the year, and it makes a really neat look through the summer, especially when it gets its seed heads on over the top. It's kind of like a cloud. And then in the fall, it turns this gorgeous yellow color. It can be very beautiful. You want to mass plants together. So if you have a bunch of tulips, rather than scattering out one tulip here, here, and here, you put them close together so that you get this burst of color in the landscape. The same thing you can do with, festuca, which is the blue, one of the blue grasses, or you can do with alyssum. These are all great plants that you can put in your yard, but you put them together so you get a mass of color in your landscape. Resources for plants. I suggest some of the resources that you can use from K-State. For these are tried and true plants. We know these are going to grow here. So the preferred trees for South Central Kansas is a great one for trees. Waterwise plants. These are all plants that don't need that much in the way of water. So these are the plants that can go in that low water or that moderate water area, moderate maintenance area in your landscape. The Prairie Star annual flowers, those are wonderful. Prairie bloom perennial flowers. Ornamental grasses, deciduous shrubs, those lists are all on the K-State website. Evergreen shrubs as well, because evergreens and even some of the deciduous shrubs will provide color throughout the winter. Evergreens are what you say, evergreen. Deciduous shrubs, I have little leaf, I'm drawing a blank, I hate that. Viburnum, little leaf viburnum in my yard. And it keeps its leaves all winter and only starts losing those in the spring as the new buds start to open. Great plant. I love it. And it's in bloom right now and it smells so yummy. I love that shrub. It gets pretty big. It can get to about 10, 11 feet tall, but it's a great shrub and it has winter interest. So Echinacea, That's the purple flower on this page. It's a native. They have now dozens of varieties of it. You can get white ones, you can get dark purple ones, you can get ones that are double petaled. It's amazing. The orange plant is butterfly milkweed. Our monarchs are struggling, and this is one plant that they love. And if you want to have monarchs, butterflies in your yard, plant butterfly milkweed. And of course, the grasses are always great. Limit your lawn. If you want a drought-tolerant landscape, you want to take advantage of this most expensive plant. And yes, it is the most expensive plant that you can put in your landscape. You have to mow it. It requires overhead watering rather than drip irrigated watering. So you lose, when you have to actually irrigate your lawn, you're losing depending on the heat and the wind for the day. You can lose a lot of water to evaporation when you're watering your turf. And one of the things that's interesting, and I always use this quote from Dr. Jack Fry, is that because Kansas is on the northern edge of the warm season grasses growing area and on the southern edge for the cool seasons grasses growing area, we can't grow either one well. And Dr. Fry always says, pick your poison. If you want a cool season lawn, a fescue, a bluegrass, go ahead, but realize it's going to look best in the fall and the winter and the spring. If you want a warm season lawn, it'll start greening up here in May. It'll be nice through September, but then it's brown in the winter. So as Dr. Fry says, pick your poison, but just realize this is an expensive plant. So you want to take advantage of it. It should be, the place where the kids play, or where you want to have groups of people when you entertain, but limited. It's nice. You can look over it. It helps you see through things to a view that you want. But to have turf grass from the fence to the fence, from the building to the back fence, it's just not the best plant for that. And also, turf grass does not like to grow in shade. I know a lot of people, one of the questions I get a lot is, well, what grass does well in shade? None of them do. They evolved in sunny meadows, so they don't like shade. And you're going to find yourself fussing with them. So I just say, put a ground cover in your shaded areas. Don't worry about trying to get grass to grow there. Of course, maintenance helps drought tolerance, and it's important that way. I always tell people, you got to use mulch. Mulch around your annuals and your perennials, mulch around your trees, mulch around your shrubs. You mulch around your trees because trees like to fuss with, well, if you really know about plants and Mother Nature, they're fighting each other all the time. They're fighting for the resources there. They fight for the sun, they fight for the water, they fight for the nutrients. And some of them are kind of nasty. They will send out hormones that will actually prevent other plants from growing in their space. Black walnuts trees are one of those that do that. They have a hormone that will keep other plants from growing underneath them very well. So you want a shallow-rooted ground cover, say vinca, to go under those black walnut trees, because grass hate and black walnuts hate each other. So, and if you can't get something to grow there, mulch it. Mulch looks beautiful, it suppresses the weeds, and it also cools the soil. It helps hold the water in, so it keeps your water from evaporating. I really encourage people to utilize mulch. It's the gardener's best friend. There's all kinds of mulches. You don't have to go with wood chips. You could go with shredded cedar. You can get mulch now in colors. So you can actually kind of make designs in your garden bed using the mulch color. You can use your compost. Compost works fine. You can use prairie hay or straw. It all depends on what you're trying to grow and whether or not that they want to tolerate that. When you do mulch, do keep the mulch away from the main plant stem. They don't like things touching them. They're kind of like the kids in the back seat. Don't touch me, don't touch me. But they are cool. And they do like mulch in the areas around them. Watering. A drought tolerant landscape doesn't need a lot of water, especially if you have amended the soil so that the water can get into the soil and then be held there for a while for the plant's use. That's good. But the best thing about drought tolerant landscapes is because you have massed plants together that like to be together, then you can set up an irrigation zone for them alone, and you don't have to water the whole yard to just get this one place over here that needs more water than the other places. So you're not drowning one section of the yard to get the other yard watered to its needs. So that's another reason, when you're planning your drought tolerant landscape, definitely think in zones and rooms. And when you have those zones and rooms, you fill them with plants that will work together with each other. You want to use correct tools. I tell people get sprinklers that throw out big drops, not fine misty drops, but big drops, and throw them out horizontally and don't throw them in the air. Again, if you throw water up in the air during the hot parts of the summer, Mother Nature is going to take a tax, an evaporative tax on your water. And if you're watering with groundwater, you'll have, when that water is evaporated, you'll have minerals left over. And those minerals, may cause problems for your garden. And I would just be careful. Again, horizontal, and everything's fine. Up in the air with evaporation, you've got a problem. And of course, if you're using city water, that's expensive. Especially in the summer, because the city has 3 levels of water costs, and they give you only a certain amount based on your winter usage for at the base rate of water. And then once you go over that, they start charging you for the next level of water, which is usually 2 times, sometimes 3 times the base rate. It gets expensive really quick. And of course, the 3rd level of water use, they really charge the heck out of it because they think that water is excessive use. So they're trying to send you a message. If you get into the 3rd tier of the water rates, a message is being sent that you're using too much. So using the correct tools, again, water sprayed out horizontal. Drip irrigation is a great one because, of course, it is a hose that you lay out on the ground. It's got little emitters, and those little emitters put out the water just where you need it. It's not spraying everywhere. It's just where you want it to go. And that makes it nice. Of course, regular maintenance, regular pruning, checking for pests, fertilizing when plants need it. That's all part of getting to know your plants. I like to get to know my plants. I like to know the story of them, whether they're a native plant or a naturalized plant. Okay, this one came from China. Cool. Or this one grew up right here in the prairie. These are all things that it's kind of fun to get to know them. Do they have pest problems? What should I be looking out for? It's all just a fun thing to be able to do, to get to know your plants and know what they need. Regular pruning. No, you need to know when a plant needs to be pruned. Plants that set bud, say in the fall for a spring bloom, you don't prune here in the spring or you're going to mess up your bloom. For plants that set bud for on this year's wood, they're going to bloom later in the summer. Those you can do some pruning on. But really, I do most of my pruning in the winter. Another thing you have to realize about pruning is when you prune a plant, that tells it to start growing. It's like it's been munched on, and it thinks, "Oh, I lost some of my mass, my leaves. I don't have as much area for catching the sun now. I need to add something," and you'll force it to add green growth. Pay attention to the weather. If we're going into a drought or if we're in a drought, don't prune. Because if you prune during the drought, your plants are going to need extra water. And that's important. So I kind of try and prune during the winter. That way the plants start the spring having been cut back and they then aren't feeling like they are forced to grow. Fertilizing, there's good times and bad times to fertilize, like especially with turfgrass lawns. You want to fertilize cool season grasses in the fall. And of course, you want to fertilize warm season grasses in May and June, because that's when they need it. Checking for pests. If you know what pests to look for, like if you have a tree, say a crabapple tree, crabapple trees can be prone to scab or rust. These are what's the other one? It's a blight, fire blight. So you keep an eye on your tree. You don't have to go out there every day looking for problems, but keep an eye out. You see something starting to happen, it's like, oh, let me check this out. What's going on? It's something that you can just kind of keep an average look out for these problems, because if you catch them early, it helps the plant, and then the plant doesn't need babying and extra fertilizing and extra water to bring it back. Sometimes you do reach the point where if a plant is not healthy, you just pull it out and start over. But I hate doing that because I get to know my plants. They are fun and I do enjoy them. So if you need help, we've got the garden hotline, and it's a great tool. I do encourage people to call if you've got problems, if you've got questions, if you want additional help in learning about a plant. They have got wonderful people on staff who can help you with that. So it's something that I even help with the garden hotline. Usually I'm signed up for the fall this year, but you can email us, you can call us, and if really necessary, we'll ask you to bring a sample of your plant in if we can be able to help you. Though many times, if you know how to take a good photograph with your phone, we can diagnose from that. And so if you want to know what kind of plant that's currently coming up in your garden, we can help you figure that out. If you think that you've got a problem with your plant, the most recent weather that we had, cold weather, has created some problems on plants. So you might want to be looking at your plants that you live with and see how they're doing. I'd encourage you to check out the other resources that K-State have. They have so many programs, and it's all unbiased, research-based information. And one of the reasons I ended up being a master gardener was I started going out there and utilizing some of their other sources and found out about master gardening and said, oh, hey, I think I could do this. This sounds fun. So, so many other wonderful places, things and information that are there for you. And of course, K-State is an equal opportunity place. So all programs and materials are open to all. I'll take any questions now that we might have. Um, so,
Okay, great. Let's see here. We did have someone ask about how much water was needed in the soil test.
as you can see there in the jar that I had, it's kind of half and half. So if you've got 2 cups of soil, you might want 3 cups of water. So I think that would, like I said, you want it to be a pretty liquidy slurry, and that helps the particles all get mixed in with the water so that they then can separate out appropriately. So pretty much, if you go with, you might even want to use 4 cups. That if I remember right, that jar is a half-gallon jar, so I put in pretty close to half-gallon of water in it. I filled it almost full, added the soil, and then shook it up. So, and,
Okay.
that's
I'm going to try that in my yard. I'm kind of interested to know what it looks like out there.
What kind of soil you've got?
Yeah. Okay. How about your thoughts on no-dig gardening?
No-dig gardening. Again, that works. I've heard it done in several different ways. You can do what they call lasagna gardening, where you layer, say, newspaper with compost, You layer it and then plant your plants into that. In no-dig gardening, you might be limited on the type of plant, given the type of soil you have, you might be limited on the type of plants you have. Some plants will do better in sandy soil because they prefer a looser soil than they'll do in clay soil. If you're going to put in a no-dig garden, you're definitely going to want to mulch it. That will help the plant over time. But I really think that because urban soils are so poor, it's really, if you want to have a true drought tolerant landscape, you're going to want to amend that soil. It's just much more helpful. The plant is happier, and it can get the resources it needs to make it strong so that it can resist drought. If you've got good soil, you don't have to worry. You could do a no-dig garden, and if you're really, I would say, if you want to do a no-dig garden, I would make the high maintenance area the area that you really do amend the soil. If you want a high maintenance area, if you're going to go with a moderate maintenance area or a low maintenance area, you can probably, especially in the low maintenance area, you could probably get away with a no-dig garden there. Yeah. I had to think about that one. Good question.
Okay. For those of you asking about whether or not this session is recorded, it is being recorded right now, and we will definitely post that on our YouTube channel. It sometimes takes about a week, sometimes less, for us to get that produced and uploaded. So just, and all of the previous ones that we've done so far in this series will be on our YouTube channel as well. Okay. And if I can multitask, I'll try to make sure that it gets a link to our channel gets in the chat box. But you can also just Google it. Okay, so will your soil in the front always be the same as what is in the back if your street side is built up?
No. It can differ radically. It depends on how the builders did your yard. So I would do test for each section of your yard. You can do it kind of major sections, but yeah, it can be entirely different it depends on how much they graded the yard after the building was completed. It can depend on where they dumped most of the topsoil and then raked it out. It can depend on whether you have buried concrete in your yard, because sometimes builders will just have a place where they just offload, some of they're not supposed to do this, but they do it. I have run into this many times where, you find some brick and stone and board or two, and sometimes even the Coke can somebody was drinking buried into the soil. So if you have a place in your yard that isn't growing things very well, you might want to dig it up and just see what's under there, because there can be some surprises. I know I was digging in the yard and came across a big piece of concrete. I mean, big, and nothing was very happy around that. It was kind of shallow. It was about 5 inches down, and nothing was very happy there. And so if you have a place that there's problems, you might want to check it out.
Okay. Can you name one plant for a rock garden on the west side of the yard? Do you have one that you recommend?
Oh, sedums do really well in rock gardens. They really like it, and they come in a wide variety. Another one is I can't think of the name. Oh, darn. It looks like a yucca. Yuccas would do really well too. And there's a number of different kinds of yuccas. It looks like a yucca, but it's not. It has a red bloom, and I cannot think of the name of that. Oh, it's a cool one too. It puts
Is it a
out
hot poker?
No, red hot poker is a different one. Okay. This is I'm drawing a total blank on that. Sorry. But yeah.
People keep trying to give you some assists in the comments. We've got canna, we've got aloe vera.
It looks like aloe vera, but it's not.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you guys. I am drawing a blank. Oh.
Well, you've got a lot of knowledge in your head, so it's okay that sometimes things get stuck behind. It's okay. Okay, how about, is the K-State Extension Office doing an herb day this year? Do you know that?
No, we're not doing an herb day. We're doing a bloom and grow event, which is a really neat event. So this year, what we're doing is we're putting together kits. We're putting together vegetable kits and pollinator kits, and we're going to give these out on May 1st. From 3 to 6 p.m., drive out to the extension office, and we'll have directions through the parking lot and guide you all in. And we're going to have 500 of the vegetable kits and 500 of the pollinator kits. And we're putting parsley in all of them because parsley is the herb of the year, a good herb for Kansas. And it is great for eating. It's also great for pollinators, for butterflies, especially for the big yellow swallowtails. Their little worms love the parsley, so they're a good pollinator to have. So yes, that's what we're doing this year. Hopefully in 2022 we'll be back to Herb Day. I miss Herb Day. It is just it's really a fun day for all of us, but we're still being careful.
I can understand that. We're trying to navigate the same kinds of things here at the library. And what day is that?
That is May 1st, whatever day that, just a minute, I'll see, I'll find that out. That is going to be a Saturday, May 1st.
Okay.
Saturday.
And if anybody wants more information on that, I'm sure they can get it at the extension website.
It's up on the website. Yes. Yes.
Great.
Okay.
Is there one must-have garden tool that you would recommend?
For a drought-tolerant landscape, I would recommend a soil probe. Those are to know how much water is in your garden and how your soil is doing. Again, as I said, soil is so basic to drought tolerance. It is really, truly the ground of your garden. And a soil probe actually pulls out a core of soil. So you push it down, and if you have a problem pushing it into the ground, you either have your ground's too hard, it's compacted, or it's not, doesn't have enough water. But it lets you push things down. You pull out the soil core, and you can see how your soil is doing. Soil probes, not that expensive, really great tool. And it's just, there's all the other tools, your weeders, your rakes, your shovels, all of those are important, but for a drought tolerant one, yeah. Another tool that is also very important is a rain gauge. That lets you know how much water Mother Nature has supplied for you. And if you keep a rain gauge in your garden, keep it out of the way of any trees or overhangs from the building so that it's not being shaded by anything. It's not in a place where the rain can't get to it. An open space is best. But that lets you know, oh, hey, we got a ½ inch of rain here 2 other nights. I probably don't have to water again until, a couple of days later. And then it's also good because you can leave it out under your sprinkler if you're doing overhead sprinkling, and you'll know how much water you've put down from that sprinkler. So a rain gauge, and again, they're not expensive. And sometimes you can find freebies at landscape shows and stuff, and you can pick them up. I know when I was working for the city, I gave rain gauges away. So there. So rain gauges and soil probes, I think those are very important tools.
Okay, great. Does anyone know if Sedgwick County is offering water rebates for purchasing rain barrels this year?
I don't know. I know that the city of Wichita has been doing a water conservation program for the last number of years where they would pay rebates on low water washers, dishwashers, what else? Toilets, and rain barrels was part of that. So I would check with the city to see if they're going to do that program again. You might check with the Public Works Environmental Health folks, because they're the ones who run that program. I don't know. I could ask, but I haven't done that this year. But yeah, rain barrels are excellent. You can get in even a small ½ inch rain off of maybe a 20 by 20 piece of roof. You can fill that rain barrel up and overflow it. And then of course you've got good rainwater then for watering whatever plants you want to water. Having several rain barrels ganged together by pipes in a row lets you collect as much water. Most rain barrels are in the 50 to 60 gallon range, and 50 and 60 gallons can go a ways to helping keep your plants healthy. And especially if you use it to water your indoor plants, or if you're a container gardener, you can water with the water from the rain barrel. And container gardening is drought tolerant also.
And I have another comment from one of our attendees, and says that they just saw an advertisement for it this this last week. So
Good.
definitely worth checking into if
Yes.
that's something you're trying to get a hold of. And then somebody else had a guess on your red plant, Magenta Magic, Yucca aliofolia, purple foliage.
That sounds about right. That might be it. Yes. Yes, that's a good one. That's a good one. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations to David. David got that one. Okay. How do you connect downspouts to rain barrels? Can you walk us through some of that?
It's fairly easy to do. You can either go purchase a shorter downspout and run it to your rain barrel, because your rain barrel will have an opening in the top. And I generally tell people keep mesh or screen over that opening so that you don't get so many dirt and leaves into your rain barrel. But it's pretty easy. You can either do that, or you can get out a hacksaw and you can saw that, because they're usually metal, sometimes plastic. You can saw that downspout to where it will go right into your rain barrel. And then if you put it together, you can have a spigot at the bottom of the rain barrel that you can attach a hose to, or you can just use that spigot to fill your watering cans. But it's pretty easy to attach it to that. If you don't, most people set their rain barrels up on cinder blocks, or you can actually buy rain barrel stands, or you can build a rain barrel stand depending on how you want to do it. Just if you set the rain barrel up, then you have a little more pressure behind the water if you're using a hose. But again, it's pretty easy just to hook it up. You can actually even just run it into the barrel. You get the rain spout at the length that you want it to be, and then kind of lift the barrel opening and set it on your barrel stand, and the water will go on in.
Somebody just posted in the chat, for anybody who's interested, a little more about the event that Kay was talking about, the Bloom and Grow Together
Awesome.
drive-through event that the county extension office is doing. So be sure to check that out Saturday, May 1st, 3 to 6 at the K-State Research and Extension office. Sounds cool.
Yeah, it's going to be a nice event, and it's a good way for the master gardeners to interact. We've been so pulled back by COVID-19, and we're just hating that, because we're used to being out in the community, working with people, talking with people, and helping people understand the plants that they're trying to grow. So this is one of our ways we're trying to give back to the community. So thank you for giving me the details. I appreciate that so much.